In this lesson, we're going to be looking at clean and descriptive URLs. But before we get into that, I just wanted to go through the example website that I've built up in RapidWeaver. So I've created an imaginary coffee shop called Unbelievable Coffee, and I've got a project set up here in RapidWeaver with a few pages. So we have a home page here with just a photo and a little bit of text, and it links off to some other pages. Then we have a blog with a few posts listed and a coffee page where we're going to be talking about the different types of coffee that we sell. Then there's a cafe page where we list the address of our coffee shop and a few photos, and then there is a reviews page where we're going to be listing out a few user reviews and linking off to some review sites. And there is a newsletter page, and this is where the user can sign up for your newsletter, and we'll be looking at that in a later lesson. Finally, there is a robots.txt file. Again, we'll go into more detail about this page later on, but this is going to allow us to specify which pages are indexed or which pages aren't indexed by search engines. Then we have a couple of resources, just the logo and a picture of our nice coffee shop. And I've already gone ahead and set up a few of the basic things that you need to do with every RapidWeaver project just to save us some time. So I filled out all of the general settings such as the title, slogan, my email address, the URL or the domain name of my site in the web address field here. I've added my site logo and I've customized the banner for the theme that I'm using. I have already set up my publishing details. So we're publishing to the server here and it's all set up. And finally, I'll just go through a few of the add-ons that we're using. So the theme we're using is the Voyager Pro theme from Elixir Graphics. This is a paid-for theme. There is a non-pro version of this theme that ships with RapidWeaver 7, so you can use that as well. It looks pretty similar. You're of course free to use any theme that you want during this series, and all of the information that I give you here, you can apply that to your own RapidWeaver project. I've just set up a template site here so that we can actually go through some of the settings and changes that we need to be making throughout this series on a real site. Okay, and then finally we're using the built-in blog page for the blogs here, and then we're using stacks for a few pages, well worth getting from Your Head Software. And we are using a couple of different stacks. The first one is Map by Yuzulu Themes, and the other one is Photo from Nick Cates Design. So you can see here I'm using the photo and the map stacks here. And finally on the reviews, we're not using any special stacks, we're just using the built-in stacks that come with stacks by default. So only a couple of extra add-ons that we're using, not necessarily a must-have, but these are just the ones that I've used to give us an example site built and ready to go. And as I said, in no way are any of these paid-for add-ons required for the information in this series. It's just that I have used them to build up this example site so that we've got something to work on. Okay, with that being said, let's talk about clean and descriptive URLs for your RapidWeaver projects. So what I mean by clean and descriptive is that the URLs are using keywords and they are describing the content of each page. And we don't want to be keyword stuffing them, so putting in the keywords that we want to be found too often or repeating the keywords and just making it look messy. That sort of tactic isn't going to get you very far in the long run. So we're going to look at how you can set really nice, clean, descriptive URLs for each of your pages inside of RapidWeaver. So before we actually do that, let's hop over to Safari and actually look at our live site online as it is right now. Okay, so here you can see I have it published up to rapidweaverseo.com, and I have the whole site set up as you saw in RapidWeaver, and we can go through and visit each of our pages, and we have the blog here, we've got our coffee pages, and so on. The cafe and review pages are there as well. So what we're going to be focusing on obviously is the actual URLs for each one of these pages. So the URL is the address that the visitor will type in here into the address bar, and as you can see currently this page is actually under /page 3, which is a default page URL that will be set inside of RapidWeaver, and this is what we're going to be looking at customizing. And if we look at all of the pages on our site here, you can see that the home page is obviously at the root of the domain, which is rapidweaverseo.com. The blog is at /blog. The coffee page is currently at /page 1. Cafe is at /page 2. Reviews is at /page 3. And the reason you can't see the newsletter page that we have in RapidWeaver is because we're going to be looking at different ways that we can integrate the newsletter into our site. So that's not currently listed on the menu, but that is available at /contact form, as you can see here. So as I say, what we want to do is create a nice clean descriptive URL for each one of these pages. So let's go back to RapidWeaver and have a look at how we do that. So I'm going to go into edit mode to make these changes and go back to the home page. And to set the URL for each of your pages, you need to open up the page inspector, and on the first tab here you'll see that there is a metadata section, and what we want to be doing is customizing the folder path here. When you enter some text into this folder path field, that will be the URL that is used for that page. So obviously for the home page we don't want to enter anything here, because then when someone visits your domain name, this will be the first page that they see. So we'll leave this one blank, and this is obviously the page that is displayed on rapidweaverseo.com currently. So let's move on to some of the Stacks pages that had more generic folder names. So let's go to coffee, and as you can see the folder name here is page 1. And the reason this is currently page 1 is because obviously when you create the page, RapidWeaver and Stacks don't actually know what content is going to be on this page, so you're just given a generic folder path here. So as I say, page 1, page 2, page 3 and so on. And what we want to do is customize this and look at how we can make it descriptive for each one of our pages. One of the big reasons why we want to do this is because our URL should be readable for humans and for search engine bots. And when you have a page about coffee, as we do here, and the URL is /page 1, that doesn't tell the user or a bot anything about the content that is on that page. And as I mentioned before, what we obviously want to be doing is using as many keywords as is possible for each one of our pages. So we're going to be looking at how we research keywords later on in this series, but for now what you need to be thinking about is what type of words and what type of phrases are people going to be putting into Google and Bing and so on to find the content on your site. And obviously for our fictional site here, it's a cafe, it's a coffee shop, and this page is all about the coffee that we actually serve at this cafe. So a descriptive folder name might be something like our-coffee. And one thing to note is if you're using multiple words inside of the URL, always make sure that you use a hyphen to separate them. Don't leave a blank space, and I always try and avoid underscores. There's no reason to not use underscores rather than hyphens. I just feel that a hyphen is a little bit more user friendly, it looks a little bit nicer. But if you prefer underscores, that's perfectly fine, you won't get penalized for that. All the search engines will give you as many points. You won't lose anything out from using an underscore rather than a hyphen. I just feel that, as I say, the hyphen looks a little bit nicer. And the reason why I think that our-coffee is good is because it's short, it describes what's on the page, and it's easy to remember. There's no long words, there's nothing like the coffee we sell, for example. That's going to be hard to remember, it's more likely to be mistyped. And quite simply, a lot of the words there aren't going to be entered into searches that users are typing into Google. So you're not going to really gain anything out of using something like the coffee we sell, simply because those sort of terms, they're not really relevant when you're looking at keywords for searches. So keep it simple, keep it descriptive, and keep it as short as possible. And I think our coffee, or simply coffee, is a good option for this type of page. Okay, so let's move on to the cafe page. Again, this is basically the location for our cafe, it's where we are, it's some photos, it's the address, it's the opening times, and so on. So I think a good folder name or URL for this would be /location, like so. And this also works if you think longer term. Perhaps in a few years maybe we open up a second coffee shop, we have one in Brighton and then we have one in London. We can easily add sub-pages to the location folder. So for example, as I said, in a few years if we suddenly have 2 coffee shops, we could then have /location /Brighton and /London. and those would be very descriptive about the content on that page. It's obviously, this is the opening times, this is the location of the London cafe that we have, and this is the information about the Brighton cafe that we have. So having said that, one thing that you could play around with is if you wanted to have everything on the top level, you could have our cafe in Brighton, for example, and that would be the information or the location for the cafe in Brighton. So perhaps actually you want to say location in Brighton or location Brighton, something like this. It all depends on what content is actually on that page and what sort of keywords you're targeting. So coffee shop in Brighton might work for you as well, or coffee in Brighton, something like that. The types of keywords that you think people might be using to find your cafe or to find similar businesses to yours on the internet. For now, I'll keep this simple and just leave it as location. We are going to talk a little bit more about keywords and perhaps updating some of these URLs in a later episode. So for now, we'll keep it simple and we'll just go with location. Okay, and then finally reviews. As I say, this is going to be some user reviews, some links off to review sites and so on. So I think this is pretty much, we'll just go with reviews for this for now. Okay, and then finally we have a contact form, and I think this one we will, again, we'll keep it simple. We'll just call this newsletter. And then the robots file, we will discuss this in a further episode, so we'll leave that alone for now. So let's just carry on and have a look at what we've done. Okay, so obviously the home page is at home. We haven't customized the blog page yet. We might do that in just a second. And then we've done the other three under coffee, location, reviews, and newsletter. So as I say, those are short, those are simple, those are clean, and they describe pretty much what is on each one of those pages. Okay, so we've looked at the basic pages. Let's just have a look at customizing the blog folder name. The blog is a little bit more tricky because obviously we're going to be having sub pages where we create posts. So each post is going to be under the folder that we give it here. And as you can see, we have 3 posts set up. So currently these are going to be under /blog/files and then a random string, and we'll look at customizing the slug for each one of these posts in just a second. I always feel that blog is a very generic term for having something like this, where you're posting articles on a regular basis, or you're posting good information about your business, and blog often doesn't describe what you're actually doing here. So I'm going to say that we're posting articles about coffee. I want this to feel a bit more like a magazine. Really what you want to be doing is calling your blog posts or all of the pages under your blog something more relevant to you. So a good example of this is if you have a food website, perhaps you want to call your blog page recipes. That would be a lot more relevant, because if you're posting recipes on your blog every time you post, that's another keyword that's going to benefit your search engine ranking. So I like to try and customize this as best as I possibly can for the site I'm working on. And in this case, I feel like we're posting articles about coffee. So I'm going to customize this and call it articles. Okay, so that is all of our pages. We've customized the URL for each one of those. Let's publish this up to the live site and see what it looks like. Okay, so that's our site updated online. Let's go and visit that and have a look at the changes we've made. So here we can see we're on the home page, and that's obviously still on rapidweaverseo.com. Then we have the blog, which is now under /articles, which I really like. Coffee is at /coffee. The cafe is at /location. And reviews is at /reviews. So not only are these more descriptive, they're just easier to use for your visitors. They're going to be able to remember these more easily, and they're going to be able to, if they do share them with someone else, it's going to look a lot nicer when people are actually looking at that page URL. Okay, so the final thing before we actually finish up this episode is, if we go to the blog, currently you can see we have 3 posts, and if I go and read more on one of those and look at the URL for this, you'll see that we obviously have our articles folder that we entered into the page inspector in RapidWeaver for all of the blog pages. And then a standard RapidWeaver blog convention is that it is then under a files folder. So that we cannot customize, that's just how it's set up. But what we can customize is the slug for this page. So the slug is actually this portion of the URL, and we can customize this to be descriptive about the content that is actually on this page. Currently it's obviously just a random string of numbers and characters, and this is so that RapidWeaver can generate a unique URL to each one of your blog posts by default. So let's just hop back to RapidWeaver and see how we can customize that. Okay, so if we go to the edit mode and then to the blog, and if we click on the espresso one, for example, and we click on the edit button, here you can see the permalink field, and this is where we can customize that portion of the URL which is known as the slug, and in RapidWeaver here it's marked as the permalink. So here we can enter something that describes the content on the page, and for now all I'm going to do is actually enter the blog title with hyphens replacing the spaces. So for this one we're just going to call it espresso, and the next one we're going to call it brewing course, and finally, do you have a milk allergy? And one thing to note here is that obviously in the actual title we have a question mark. Generally it's good practice to leave out any type of special characters if you like, so question marks, apostrophes, stuff like that. Generally I would just remove those from the URL. You could include it, but again it's going to be a little bit more complicated, it's going to look a little bit more messy, and it's not going to give you any value. One other thing that you can think about is if you actually need to have words such as the and, or, for, a, etc. Those types of words and letters, you could remove those if the URL is getting really long, because ideally we want our URLs to be around sort of 100 characters or so. So if you have a really long blog post title, you might want to shorten it down by just removing stuff like do. I think we'd have to leave it in this example, but we could perhaps remove the a part of this URL and it will still make sense when you're sharing it. It kind of depends. Just try and keep your URLs at a decent length. Somewhere around 100-ish characters is good, just so it's not too long, it's fairly easy to share and it's fairly easy to remember should someone want to almost guess one of your blog post URLs. Okay, but for now I think we'll leave it like that because our blog post title isn't actually that long. Do you have a milk allergy is perfectly fine. It matches up the title to the blog post, which is important, and we will talk about that in another episode as well, where we're matching the URL to the titles to the actual page content. But for now, as I say, as long as this permalink is describing your posts here, then we're on the right track. So we've customized these 3 posts. Let's go and publish those live and see what it looks like. So again, let's go and visit that in the browser. And if we go to our blog page and scroll down and have a look at the links here, you can see at the bottom of the Safari window there, we're now at articles/files/do you have a milk allergy.php. So search engine bots are going to like that. Users are going to know what to expect on that page, and when they visit that, obviously that URL matches up with the actual content that's on the page. So these are all the types of things that you want to be thinking about when you're setting URLs for your site. And just to confirm the other two, we've obviously got brewing course, so we're at /articles/files/brewing course. So that does it for this video. In the next video we're going to be looking at how we customize the browser titles to match up with our URLs and the actual titles inside of our page content. I'll see you there.